Hey guys, and here to break down UFC 294. Originally Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira. Obviously, in the past week a lot has happened that's completely turned the card on its head. How do you feel about that? Originally it was Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira, and for the co-main it was Paulo Costa versus KHAMZAT Chimaev. Now we have Islam Makhachev versus ALEXANDER VOLKANOVSKI for the lightweight belt, and KAMARU USMAN versus KHAMZAT CHIMAEV for the #1 middleweight spot. Personally, I'm so much more excited for this card. I really feel like it's going to be amazing. It's a little bit of a shame though that Volkanovski and Usman didn't get really any time to prep, and that could be a hindrance, or it could actually be a blessing for them. So I'm sure a lot of people are very disappointed that Oliveira had to pull out last minute because he got a really nasty cut through his eyebrow. A few people are saying that he could have gone to a surgeon and had it stitched up properly, but I think there's a lot more to it than just that. Or if you remember, Oliveira didn't want to take this fight so soon. He would have preferred it to be next year, but the UFC persuaded him to take this fight in October, where I know that he wanted more time. So it's probably a blessing in disguise for Oliveira, because it felt like that he knew this wasn't good timing for him anyway. So I'm kind of relieved in that sense, because it kind of felt like they were pressuring him to fight on Islam's terms, which is fair because Islam's a champion, but you feel like Oliveira deserved a little bit more respect than that. So I'm not terribly disappointed. Also, obviously, I'm really excited for Volkanovski to be facing Islam and having another shot, because I was beginning to think that he wouldn't get it. Mainly because of timing, and he's now 35 and he's at the end of his prime. Well, he must be getting close to nearing the end of his prime. Volkanovski is, he's the best fighter in the world, but, Father Time, as they say, catches up to everyone. But I was just thinking, what if something happens to him like it did to Izzy, that he loses, say, to Ilia Topuria in a title defense, and then he's nowhere near rematching Islam. So I'm actually quite excited for Volkanovski. This is his chance. He's probably his last chance. Same for Usman. I'm excited for him because I felt like there was nothing really left for him at welterweight. I know he's talking about getting I listened to a recent interview and he says, I could go beat Khamzat, beat Strickland, and then go back down and get the welterweight title. And that sounds exciting, but I don't think that that's really what's going to happen. But I think it's nice for him to have another sort of a fresh opportunity, something exciting. Now that Strickland's won the belt, it really gives him that initiative, because he has beaten Strickland before. And I do think that the matchup with Khamzat is a perfect matchup. It's just, again, a bit of a shame that it's last minute for Usman. I think more so for Usman than Volkanovski, because this is Usman's first fight at middleweight. So we don't really know how he's going to just fit in there, especially given his circumstances. He's coming off those 2 losses. So I think it is a little bit tougher for Usman. And I think a lot of that fight does depend on Usman. But before I break down those fights in more detail, let's go over some of the fights before that. So the card opens up with Said Nurmagomedov as a favourite against MUIN GAFUROV. MUIN, I think he's a fresh contender off Contender Series, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. So he's new in the UFC. He's only had 1 fight that he's lost. They've put him right up against Said Nurmagomedov, who has, he has a pretty big reputation for someone that hasn't really achieved, I think, something to match that, to be fair. Said lost his last fight. All these Nurmagomedovs, they're instantly given lots of respect and lots of credibility due to their name, but they're not all Habibs. So I think Said's a bit of an example of that. He's done extremely well on a lower level, but now climbing the bantamweight rankings, he's not actually quite up to scratch if you compare him to Habib. So now they're giving him a tune-up fight. This poor guy, who's only lost 1 fight, no other fights in the UFC, but he's still got a decent resume, a decent record. So it's hard to say how is Nurmagomedov going to feel after losing that fight in the way that he did. He was supposed to beat Jonathan Martinez. I've also put that, I feel like Said Nurmagomedov's been piggybacked for so long, and by that I mean he's been fed easy opponents to build him up safely without sort of tarnishing his record or his reputation. That works with some people, like Sean O'Malley. It worked because he actually knew how to better himself through working in the gym, working and training really well. But I think for some fighters it's quite difficult to get better without the experience in the cage. And I think Said Nurmagomedov may be that kind of fighter, just because I feel like he's overhyped, and I do think he'll probably win this fight just because he's got more experience in the UFC, but I wouldn't be surprised actually to see those odds be a little off, just because it looks like his opponent Gafurov has had a few finishes. So I think it'll be maybe more competitive than what we think. But having said all that, I do give the edge to Said Nurmagomedov. Next up we have IKRAM ALISKEROV versus WARLLEY ALVES. So IKRAM, I think I have seen him a couple of times. Somehow he's ranked number 11. He had a KO over Phil Horst, who was doing quite well. Mario Souza, again, another decent fighter. So he's on a winning streak. He's only lost one fight. He's got a significant height and reach advantage, and he's a minus 425. So I think it's safe to say that he's probably going to win this fight. I don't really know much else about him, but just looking at the stats alone, it looks like he's going to get this done. WARLLEY Alves, he is on a 2-fight losing streak. He's lost 4 out of his last 6. So all the stats are heavily against him. So that's a bit of a giveaway fight. That's all I got to say on that one. Anything can happen though. So Magomed, ANKALAEV and Johnny Walker for the featured bout, or the third last bout of the night. I think this fight's kind of flown under the radar a little bit. When it was first announced, I think people were really excited, but with all the chaos that's happened, I think it's kind of flew under the radar. Magomed ANKALAEV is minus 330. Johnny Walker's plus 230. ANKALAEV is interesting. He's been on a massive win streak, and of course he had the draw against Jan Blachowicz in his last fight, and he got really grumpy about the decision, and he appeared to have really bad sportsmanship, but I don't blame him, because even though I believe he lost that fight, I think Jan won 3-2. Because he was winning those last couple of rounds so well, he must have felt like he won. Similar to when Volkanovski thought that he won against Islam, he was winning the last bit of the fight. So it makes you feel like you win, but it doesn't mean that you've won the fight. You would have won if it kept going, but it's a 5-round competition. Having said that though, he's only lost one fight to Paul Craig 5 years ago. Okay, that's weird. Again, I feel like ANKALAEV has been a little bit catered to. A little bit. Like, he hasn't fought any killers. Like, he fought Thiago Santos when he was done. He fought Anthony Smith when Anthony Smith was kind of more or less done. And then Jan Blachowicz is kind of a washed up version of himself. He hasn't really fought someone like Alex Pereira or... I think this is his first really dangerous fight. Johnny Walker's been super dangerous. He's learned more composure, and he has that beautiful height and reach advantage. And he's becoming more composed and more well-rounded. Although him himself, his last wins were Anthony Smith, Paul Craig, who didn't really stand a chance, Iwan Kitulaba. So I think they're kind of on par. It's a really good matchup. I wouldn't count Johnny Walker out. It's probably a fun bet to have, just because I think Johnny Walker's learned how to deal with the grappling and the wrestling a bit more. If he can get in there and not take time, which I don't think he would, I can see Johnny Walker winning this fight actually. And I'm basing this off emotional composure, just because Magomed seemed to feel entitled, and I think the moment you feel entitled to something, you're fucked. I feel like he may be coming off that last fight maybe a little bitter, and if he is, like the same way Petr Yan was when he thought that he beat Aljo or Sean O'Malley, it eats away at a fighter's abilities. So if he has gotten over that, then I would favour him, though I don't think he has, so I'm going to say Johnny Walker gets this done. Now we have the co-main event. Originally Costa and KHAMZAT CHIMAEV. I didn't have any faith in Costa. He's the most unprofessional fighter I've ever known on any level. He is a little bitch. I completely disrespect him, and I don't mean to be cruel, but he's really cruel to himself. He has such bad self-sabotage. I just want to reach out to him and say, do you understand what's happening here? You need help. Especially when he pulled out against Robert Whittaker. that could have been his chance to get back to the belt. And I'm surprised, very surprised, that the UFC have been this catered to him, especially because he's been so unprofessional. I don't care how marketable you are. If you're this unprofessional, you can't be relied on. So I just hope he gets his shit together. I think the UFC should let go of him. He needs to do something else, or he needs therapy. And I'm being serious about that, because I understand what it's like. KHAMZAT CHIMAEV isn't all that much better, to be honest, because he's been a little bit unreliable, but I think for different reasons. I think KHAMZAT is a bit more of a lone wolf, free spirit, not the kind of person to be told on what terms he's going to do something. I think it's a little different. I do think that PAULO Costa has really bad self-sabotage. I mean, drinking a whole bottle of wine before you're going to fight for a championship is enough to see you have really bad problems, and to keep going on and on and on with little things. Anyway, I won't harp on about that. So I'm actually looking forward to this fight more than the main event. I love Usman, and I think this is a really great, fun opportunity for him. Usman is now 36, and he did seem to look a little slower. Whether or not that was just because he had too much of a quick turnaround after getting KO'd, that could have a lot to do with it. Also, he's never really fought at middleweight, so he could have a few issues there, and he's clearly going to be... I don't think he's in his prime anymore. He's got a lot of injuries, so those things are big things to consider. I don't think he should be a plus 245 underdog. I think the odds should be more even. I would have this maybe Usman being plus 100 and KHAMZAT being minus 100 or something like that. I think it's a lot closer than people think, and the reason being is that Usman has that championship experience. He's got extreme discipline, and he's had a lot more experience than KHAMZAT at a higher level. He's had double the fight experience. So I wouldn't count Usman out at all. In fact, I'm pretty tempted to put $1 on Usman myself. Yeah, but the biggest hindrance, I think, for Usman is the age, because he's 36 with the injuries, and he did look slower. And KHAMZAT's 29, so he's going to be really fresh, especially at middleweight. He's not going to be drained of energy or anything, so he'll have better conditioning. He'll be able to take the punches better too, so that is something to consider. Usman has the reach advantage, and KHAMZAT has the height advantage. Usman's obviously coming off these 2 losses to Leon Edwards, and before that was a unanimous decision over Colby Covington in the second fight they had together, although that was 2 years ago, so that was quite some time ago. KHAMZAT, on the other hand, has a height advantage. His last wins were submitting Kevin Holland at catchweight, the decision over Gilbert Burns, which I thought could have gone either way, and the sub over Ling Jingliang. So he hasn't really, apart from the Gilbert Burns fight, he hasn't really had a real fight, because those 2 other fights were just one-sided. They weren't really fights. So I wonder how he's going to go going straight up against someone like Usman, who is a champion. Very interesting. For Usman, I think that if he uses the jab and remains disciplined, he could really start picking apart KHAMZAT. If he can stay composed and survive the first round, I think he can get himself ahead in the fight, because I do feel like KHAMZAT might try and get him out early, just so that he can not let Usman get going and put an end to him quickly. The wrestling is probably going to be cancelled out, I think, because they're both extremely good at wrestling. Like I said, Usman has double the fight experience and at a higher level, although this is his first fight at middleweight, and he has not won a fight in 2 years. It's the end of his prime, and he's slower with the injuries that he has, although a lot of that, could have been the fact that he turned around too quickly after losing to Leon the first time. For KHAMZAT, he could rush Usman. He's in the perfect prime zone, but he hasn't fought in a year, and he hasn't fought the same guys that Usman has. He's also, I think, changed his country of residence, and I think he's changed his gym up. But I think for KHAMZAT, that was a positive change if he left that coach of his, because I think KHAMZAT just needed someone different. I feel like mentally Usman can win this fight. I want Usman to win this fight. I think he can. I think a lot of it depends on how Usman shows up mentally and physically. If he's physically able, and mentally I know he will be, I think he can win this fight. I really do. The weight thing could be uncomfortable for him though. But I know Usman wanted this fight for a while. And I know that he wanted it last year, and I think he even wanted it at middleweight for a fun fight, but I don't actually know that. I think he can mentally break him, and that's my pick. I reckon Usman will get it done. But I'm a fan, so I love Khamzat too, but he's a little spoiled brat sometimes. No, I'm just joking. But that is something to take into account also, is that Khamzat is now a mega star. And I feel like he kind of loves it and kind of hates it at the same time. He seems to be a very sensible person. He's crazy, but he doesn't like all the... I don't think he loves being a megastar. I think he just wants to mind his own business and get on with his life and not deal with all this shit. But I think on the other hand, he loves the attention. But I think he likes to have that escape as well. I think he's more introverted than people may think, and he just wants to switch it off. And I don't think he really wants to be a champion so much. I don't get that vibe from him. I think he's content just fighting for the joy of it, and I don't think he ever felt that he would have this much money or whatever his situation is, but he gets treated so well. If you watch his videos, he's hanging out at the palace in wherever, Abu Dhabi, with all these wealthy princes, and he seems to be well connected and well respected in that way. So I can't see why I just wonder whether he still has that same hunger, and I just feel like he doesn't have the same drive. He doesn't need to be champion. That's just what I think. But we'll find out. So I'm still going to Usman. And lastly, the main event, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovsky for the lightweight title. So Islam is a reasonable favourite, and Alexander is still quite an underdog given how the last fight went. Yeah, like I said, back whenever the fight happened, I do feel like Islam won that fight. Islam is 31 now, and Alexander Volkanovsky is 35, which is getting a little bit in the red zone for someone at that weight class. Although Alexander Volkanovsky is an exception, I guess. They've had pretty much equal amounts of fights and losses and wins. Islam's taller, Volkanovsky has the reach advantage. I feel Islam bested Volk the last time round in the striking, and I think a lot of that has to do with the concentration of Volkanovsky. He was more concentrated on the wrestling exchanges and trying to get into his head by talking to him in the cage. Another thing to take into account is that Islam Makhachev has a massive weight cut, so you never know how his conditioning is going to be. But he does have a hometown advantage in Abu Dhabi. Oh, you know what I mean. He has an advantage in Abu Dhabi. His last win was the decision over Alexander Volkanovsky, so he hasn't had a fight since then. Oh, that's interesting. Although he was preparing for Charles Oliveira, who was a very different type of fighter. Before that, he submitted Charles Oliveira and he TK'd Bobby Green. Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, so Islam's an interesting case. I feel like he's obviously like the best lightweight in the world, but he doesn't have the best resume. He hasn't really fought the who's who. He hasn't done what Habib's done in a way. Look at his last 3 fights. TKO Bobby Green, even though Bobby's look great. Bobby Green, I feel, is probably one of the best strikers, but up against a mixed martial artist, he's not really in the top elite of the division. And then he submitted Charles Oliveira, and I feel a little bit of dismay for Islam just because we haven't seen him fight Gaethje, or even we never got to see Benil Dariush or Gamrod or any of these people. And I feel a little bit of dismay because I feel like we haven't really seen him fight some real contenders at lightweight, some fresh contenders. And even though it's really cool to see him fight Volkanovski, being the Volkanovski fan, for Islam's perspective and where he lands in the lightweight division, it kind of feels a bit, well, he's just fighting the same guys over. Like, is he going to fight Oliveira again after this? I don't know. I don't know. I feel like his resume, I wish his resume could have looked different, but then he may not have ever got to the title, although I think he would have. But so Volkanovski, he's been busy in the meantime. He's obviously had that fight with Yair Rodriguez where he TKO'd him. He fought well in that fight, looked good. He had those injuries that were annoying him during the fight, but he ended up having the perfect counter to one of Yair Rodriguez combinations. Before that, he lost a unanimous decision to Islam, and then he won against Max Holloway. So the biggest concerns I have for Alexander is that he's 35 now, and that's getting a little bit old for most featherweights, lightweights. In the last fight, I feel like he was lacking in the striking defense, and I don't think he landed the same shots that Islam landed, but he did start to take over in the 5th round, and he would have won the fight if it kept going. So if he's able to out-cardio Islam in this fight, that could be good. We'll see, but Islam's still young. See, he's 31. Like, if Islam was 35 and he was doing another cut to lightweight, I would say, oh, that's not good, he's going to lose his chin. But because he's 31, he's probably still young enough to handle such a massive weight cut. But I know it's not an easy one, but still, he's young enough probably to just take it. So this is obviously, again, a last-minute fight. I think it's perfect timing, actually, for Volkanovski, because Islam hasn't been able to prepare for him, and Volkanovski hasn't really been able to prepare for him, but he would have been training in the background a little bit to mentally prepare, maybe more so than what Islam was, because he was focused on Oliveira, who's a very different fighter. And Volkanovski also mentioned that he's been rested and he's hungry, and maybe sometimes it is better to be rested than overworked, so that could be something. And I do think this is Volkanovski's last shot. Having said all that, it's really tough to know. A lot of people want Volkanovski to win, as do I, but it's really hard to say, because we want to believe in magic, like when Sean Strickland beat Izzy recently and became champion. I think Volkanovski can make it happen, but I don't think Islam's going to sleep on him at all. I think he's going to be super composed. Volkanovski's going to just have to do something, throw something out there that he wasn't expecting. It's really tough to actually make a prediction for this fight. I really think this fight will go to whoever wants it more, and if that's Volkanovski, then I have to give the advantage to Islam again, just because I think he's probably going to be better conditioned for this fight. Now, you know what? I'm going to go with Volk. Because I know Islam's so good. I know he's so good technically. Because he would have practiced so hard for Oliveira. He's not going to be quite. How well can he adapt to Volkanovski again? And that could be Volkanovski's chance. So I'll go with Volkanovski for the upset. That's about it. Thanks for dropping by, and enjoy the fights. I'm really excited. And see you around the traps. Also, thanks to Jackie for the new wall photos and signatures. I still don't have them all up there, but woo! I will!